Today, George is going to talk about religion and politics.
My first introduction to religion was at the Romanian church, and our house was a couple of blocks from the church, so as a result, as a young boy, I spent a lot of time at the church. We had a Sunday school classroom, and we had some classes, and it was conducted pretty much like the old schools in the United States, the rural schools. And if you didn't behave or you taught, they sit in the corner and a bunch of kernels of corn on your knees for punishment. So they were pretty severe, so you didn't mess around in classes. And they just basically was learning Romanian. And but they only went there for about a year or so. And then they just ceased having a school. But that was my introduction to the Romanian schools, the Romanian classrooms, and the techniques that the old school systems of the United States had. Forms of punishment, if you misbehaved, you get whacked on the knuckles, and so forth.
So you were an acolyte.
Yeah, that's right. So on Sundays, my mother made me go, told me to go. I went to church every Sunday, and when they started to get the outfits for the acolytes, and if you were there, you became an acolyte based on your size and whatever icon you're going to hold. We did that Sundays for quite a few years. And the thing I dreaded about it was the Romanian services aren't just a 1 hour service, they go for almost 3 hours. So that kind of gets tired after a while. But you have to be, as an acolyte with your whatever icon you're holding, at the altar, and maybe 1 or 2 hours at a time you'd be standing. I mean, it's very tedious work, but you enjoyed it because you'd participate in something religiously.
And then your family moved to the west side of Detroit, and did you continue going to church then?
Well, the west side, at that time, we didn't have a car, so occasionally we get a ride with somebody to go from the west side to the church on the east side. So our attendance wasn't too prompt, but it just, so my attendance was not very many. I don't know, that's fine. Didn't go as often as we normally did when we were close by the church. So your interest kind of wanes when you don't go and participate in the activities.
Okay, and then pretty much let's move on to when you were in college, and you were, what fraternity were you with?
When I went to college?
What was your fraternity?
Oh, well, I have a Romanian boy who graduated from Eastern, who was a member of Kappa Phi fraternity, and as a result I pledged and joined the Kappa Phi fraternity. And my first year in college, school, I lived in a rooming house. My room was $2 a week, and a double bed, and my roommate was a young man from Quincy. And we slept together in this double bed all for the whole year and didn't touch each other, but we had a great time. He was a good student. He was a drop-off from Sacred Heart Seminary. He was going to be a Catholic priest, and he opted not to go into priesthood, so he dropped the priesthood deal and came to Eastern Michigan. And I was fortunate to have him as a roommate because he was an all-A student, and he eventually, when he graduated, he held some very administrative jobs in education.
And what was his name?
Bill Donnelly. and he came from, like I say, from Quincy. There were 3 boys and 3 girls in the family, and 5 of them had doctor's degrees, and one sister just had a master's degree. But they were well-learned, a very good family, and Dick Donnelly, after he graduated from Eastern, because of his administrative abilities and so forth, he marched pretty high in his administration and education nationally, and he's very prominent. He killed in a plane crash on school business in Colorado years ago.
Well, that's a shame. Getting back to your fraternity days, where did you go to church while you were in college?
Well, it's funny. A couple of roommates or fraternity brothers were Catholics, and I'd go with them to the Catholic church once in a while. And of course, the ones that were Protestants, I'd sometimes go to a Protestant church, so I didn't have a real major one. I just went one of the churches, whether Catholic or Protestant.
Okay. Well, let's move on to when you and Betty moved to Homer. Which which church did you end up going to there?
Well, getting back to Betty, one night my 2 fraternity brothers, Bill Noose and Milt Simpson, went out. They're looking for dates on a Friday night. The first stop was the campus drug. We walked through to see who was there, so we could see if there was anybody who may be interested in dating. Well, there was 2 girls. Carol, Betty was there with her girlfriend Cecilia, and they were having a Coke. And we stopped and started talking with them, and in the process, I was looking for a date because the fraternity party was coming up this weekend, and I got Betty's address and phone number, and I wanted to meet her before this party to see if she could dance. So we arranged for a date. I went to where they had a band in one of the beer gardens, and my first dance with her, I was really surprised because she could really dance. So that fixed me up for the incoming dates. So any dates I would make, where we had bands, we did a lot of dancing, and Betty was a good dancer.
Great, thank you. Now, let's go back to the topic of religion. And so when you and Betty were married and then you finally moved to Homer, then which church did you select to go to?
Well, Betty's folks were Baptist members, and Betty and I got married in a Baptist church. And when we moved in with them, we would go to a Baptist services. This is when I lived in Toledo. But the only time we did go to churches was when we were with Betty's folks. And whatever Sundays, we had to be with them on a Sunday, we went to church. And it was generally a Baptist church.
And then in Homer, when you moved to Homer.
Well, now, when we moved to Homer, Betty's uncle and aunt lived in Homer, and they were members of the Methodist Church in Homer.
And what were their names?
Betty's uncle was Joe Warwick, and his wife was Margaret Warwick. And they were very good Methodist members at the Homer Methodist Church. And she taught Sunday school, and Joe was very religious and helped senior classes. And as a result, Betty and I joined the Methodist Church in Homer because of her uncle and aunt.
Very good. And you've been Methodist ever since.
Right.
Well, let's move over to the topic of politics. And let's go way back to your childhood. What were your memories of party affiliation, if any?
Well, I was 10 or 12 years old in 1938, the presidential election, was Roosevelt was running against Smith, L. Smith. No, Roosevelt was running against Herbert Hoover. And Hoover was elected president and was in office for 2 years, or 2 terms rather. And then he didn't make the 3rd term, and at that time I can't recall who. Oh, Roosevelt beat the Republican at that time.
And going back to when you were younger, what affiliations, if any, did your parents have? And you know, what parties were the most interesting?
I was mostly influenced by the Democrats because they seemed to be the members of the working class at that time. And then I started off being a Democrat back in the early 30s.
And this was all the immigrant communities. Many of them were Democrat-leaning.
And most of the Remains and other language groups were all kind of leaning toward the Democratic Party.
Okay.
But as they became more successful, they started abandoning the Democrats and becoming the Republicans rather.
And you kept following politics over the years, from the FDR years and Truman and Eisenhower,
Sure.
Kennedy.
And later on became a very ardent Republican. And still am.
All right. Well, thank you, George.